Vuntut National Park. It was established in 1995, yet few souls have ventured here from the south. But now we take to the skies and journey into the arms of this mysterious land of lakes. It is one of the most natural places on earth. The water is like pure nectar, the air unsullied, and the creatures here are truly free. This is a sacred haven in the wilds of the Yukon's Arctic.
Unlike, your traditional national park, which is set aside for, recreational users, this park is set aside in some ways to protect the traditional Vuntut Gwitchin way of life. And I think that's a really important part of what this park represents. It was set aside to protect porcupine caribou calving habitat, so that's the reason why it exists.
In the Gwitchin language, Gwitchin means people, Vun means lake, Tut means many, and a loose translation would be Vuntut Gwitchin means people of the lakes.
It's a very remote park and it's difficult to access. Currently we can't find any fixed wing landing sites, so access in the summer is by helicopter only. In the winter it's by snow machine, but it's extreme terrain. You would need a local guide to take you out, and it's also long distance. So you need to be prepared, and it's difficult. Well, the number of visitors that have visited the park have been, under a dozen. We have one visitor this year who's hiking through the park, and he's an extreme adventure racer who survives entirely on on power bars. In this field trip has to do with assessing the health of the park, and we're going to be monitoring these changes over time on a 5-year cycle.
Here in Vuntut National Park, with the Ecological Monitoring program, there's kind of a broad range of activities that we do. Tomorrow we're going to be running a breeding bird survey. We've got snow monitoring plots now, we've got permafrost monitoring, we've got a climate station that does ground temperature and air temperature. We've got forest monitoring plots. We're setting up some tundra vegetation plots over the next few years. So that's the program in a nutshell. So here in Vuntut National Park we do a breeding bird survey every couple of years, and the idea is to get a sense of what birds are in the park during the breeding season. So what species are here, how many are here, and get an idea of the species composition for the forest areas. The fox sparrow close and one further away. White-crowned sparrow. There's a gray jay somewhere back in there. And that redpoll did a flyover. No birds and lots of bugs. How awesome is that?
It's hard to find a job like this where you spend out on the land, you learn a lot about your ancestors, you get to hike and, hike in their footsteps that they once walked on in the park. And like this trip we got to go to the caribou fences and, see really what kind of hard work it took for them to, survive. They have two drifting walls where the caribou fence, they would kind of lead them in towards the middle. Not built very strong, I guess just enough for the caribou to kind of funnel along inside the fence. In the same way that Vuntut is integral to our culture, the caribou as well are the lifeblood of our people. Right here we have one of the caches of the Thomas Creek caribou fence. Probably used for camping out in, and definitely storing meat and smoking meat after the kill. And as you can see, it's looking pretty fragile. It could be, well dated, around maybe 200 years old. Now we're looking at the caribou herd as an indication of how healthy the park is. That coincides with how healthy our culture is, really, when you think about it. We depend on the caribou for our sustenance, both spiritually and physically. So without the caribou, we're pretty lost. Yeah, each year the caribou migrate through the park on their
way to and from the calving grounds on the north slope of the Yukon and Alaska. So having this area protected from any kind of development is pretty key to protecting the species. The Arctic National Wildlife Refuge is used heavily by the porcupine caribou herd as a calving ground, and during that time of year the caribou are highly susceptible to any kind of development or interference in their calving. It's a key step that we need to take in order to protect the porcupine caribou herd completely. We have good protection on the Canadian side. We're just hoping and working towards protection of the caribou in Alaska as well. We go down one valley and then we're up on that one long ridge above our ore spots. You can follow that all the way back.
So I study permafrost, but there's groups that are studying muskrat and moose and hydrology, vegetation patterns, a bunch of different things. And so it's a big collaborative project, and the Vuntut government has really played a lead role in bringing us all together to address questions that were important for the community. We're trying to get an idea of the conditions of the permafrost in a place like Old Crow Flats. Because it's so difficult of access, there's very little information on the permafrost. Right now there's a lot of concern over climate change. There is a lot of concern in the community too that maybe climate change may be affecting their land, affecting their lakes. We're always worried about temperature, climate warming. We talk about increasing temperatures and increasing temperature. Climate is a lot more than just air temperature, right? It's also how much it rains and how much snow falls and how windy it is and how many storms come through. And in an area like Old Crow Flats where there's a lot of lakes, these other aspects of climate have a really strong effect on permafrost. I think the mosquitoes really do a lot to protect the environment in Vuntut National Park and in that area, because you just can't go there and hang out. It's such a beautiful place, but nobody will go and build a big hotel.
Our focus is to preserve that ecological integrity and to preserve the health of the ecosystem in the park, and visitation to the park is secondary.
Well, I guess the idea of monitoring snow is to kind of watch one area and to see if the date when snow is arriving on the ground and leaving the ground is changing over time. So these are eye buttons, and they're a temperature sensor and a logger as well. So it'll record a temperature every 4 hours and record it. And it'll do that for about a year. And we'll come back next year, pull these out. I'll take them back to Whitehorse and we'll get all the data off them. And the idea is that this button will sit at ground level, and while it's not covered with snow, temperatures will go up and down during the day. And once it becomes covered with snow, that fluctuation is going to stop. So that'll give you a date, basically when snow hits the ground and when it comes off. And we're going to track that over time, over the years, to see if it changes. So for example, if you see that snow is melting weeks earlier over the years, that may be a warning sign that something is changing in the park.
Honestly, we might not see the value of these monitoring plots in our lifetime. The value of them may be in change that happens 30, 40, 50, 100 years down the road.
And it's been a really neat experience to share our scientific perspective, where we like to quantify things and measure things, and then the more local traditional perspective on these same questions, where they've heard stories and they've seen things happen over the years and also have a pretty clear understanding of what's happening, but come at it from a different perspective.
I think these kinds of spaces are important for not just people that get to see this kind of place. It's important for all Canadians to know that this kind of place is protected, even if they don't ever get to see it, but if they get to see a picture of it or get to hear about it, that to actually know that something like that is protected. I think that's part of who we are as Canadians, but most importantly for the sake of preserving something so beautiful and natural is irreplaceable.